you.
Great. Okay, good morning, good afternoon, evening, wherever you are. So, Tutuleni and I am Mong. We are going through the preparation for the CIES 2022 proposals. And please feel free to ask questions. You don't have, or type in the chat window. So let's think of what first we need to know for this. The first is the timeline. The proposal deadline, it opened on September 29 and it will close on October 20th. So this is a hard deadline. It will be important to keep that timeline in mind. The second is proposal notification. If your proposal have been accepted or not, that will be on December 2021. And the conference timeline, when the CIES 2022 will take place, which is April 18 to 22 in 2022. And the location is Minneapolis, city of Minneapolis, Minnesota in the US. Now, I'm happy to share that this year, the conference is hybrid. That means that you can be there in person, as well as you can participate online. The online can be something would be of a use for people specifically who cannot travel to the location for any reason or for any other issue. So sometimes it also helpful for indigenous people from around the world so that they can come in and participate. So, and so please note that you don't have to be physically in Minneapolis to present your paper. You can also participate online. Although there are pros and cons on both sides, and we can talk about it in the Q&A. Now, another important part is when you think of your proposal, try to connect with the main theme. And CIES announces early on what is the main theme of each year conference. So for 2022, the main theme is illuminating the power of idealism, but it's idea and realism. So you get an idea that what this conference is trying to highlight. Your paper doesn't necessarily have to exactly match the conference theme, but it is a plus point if you can match your theme or your paper, even add few things in your paper that can be aligned well with the conference theme. So pay attention to this year's theme. Now let's look at the submission type. There are more details in the CIES side. I am just highlighting a few points. You can do individual submission and you can do group submission. And in individual submission, you can have a formal paper presentation, meaning that individually you present a paper, or roundtable. Roundtable can be 3, 4, 5 people, 3 to 4, 5 papers. Not 5, I think 3 to 4. And then in the same roundtable, you sit along with audience. So people who come in, they sit around the table, and then also the 3 or 4 speakers sit around the table. And you go and present, and then there will be followed by. So this is sitting around a roundtable. So that's a roundtable presentation. Third type is poster. So you create a poster, and then you will be given a specific time and day assigned, and also a specific location where you present the poster, and then people will walk by and ask questions, you will answer. So there are pros and cons in each of those. And so I will be happy, and also others who have done this before will be happy to share about that. And the requirement is your abstract is maximum 1,000 words. So you have to fit in your proposal in 1,000 words. The group submission, which is you submit as a group, not an individual. Generally, it is that, say you have a group of colleagues. It doesn't have to be from the same university, but the people who are working on the similar areas, you come together and then you form a panel, say a panel of 3 or 4, not more than that, 3 or 4, and then you submit the proposal as a group. In this case, you have 1,000 words for the overall theme of the group panel, and then for 500 words for each individual presentations. And then also this group submission can be roundtable. So the same way, you don't submit as an individual, but you come together as 3 or 4 people as a group, and then you create a roundtable presentation proposal for it. So you can submit to IKA SIG, you can submit to other SIGs, or you can submit to a general pool. Of course, this is an indigenous knowledge in the academic SIG, so we highly recommend to submit to IKA SIG, specifically if it is topics related to indigenous knowledge or indigenous culture, indigenous language, and indigenous issues. This year, unlike other years, CIES added something new. They call it central concept, and you have to select one. So there are 5 concepts. One is tectonic shifts, adapting to a trauma in the moment. So here are some examples. Empirical and theoretical approaches to address the pandemic and its impact in education. Initiatives and critiques from international, national, and local attitude and support students in the midst of COVID-19. So this is, if you have a paper related to COVID-19, how it affects indigenous community, you will select this option, tectonic shift. Other one could be battling the currents, the influence of politics and economics on education. So here, the role of politics and economics, policies like education policies, language policies, how it affects, and understanding role of, say, decolonization, inclusive, anti-racist, or pro-democracy movement in education. Sharing tension between where education is crafted, where education is being done, and learning and teaching of those themes, anticipating impact for the future generation. Those themes fall into the battling the current. The other theme is orbits assigned, meaning that how place makes a difference. Educational accounts from spaces on global frontline challenges, or say climate change, religion, fundamentalism, militarization, dictatorship, nationalism, white supremacy, and so on and so forth, or curricular innovation from contested spaces, and then comparative exploration of different places. So those themes, papers on those themes fall into this orbits assigned. The fourth one is beyond the horizon, reimagining everything. So this is playing with new ideas, theories, ways of knowing, like indigenous ways of knowing, we talk about a lot. Imagining what can be done based on what have been learned or can be unlearned, not only just learned, but can be unlearned. And also designing a better future. So, and advocating for education future that speaks for all. So these are the 4 themes. Or you can say, no, my paper doesn't fall into any of those. So you select none of the above. So this is new. Anyone who submitted before didn't have to do this, but now this is new. Let's move to the next topic, called types of research. And then in the types of research, you have to select. Again, you don't have to write much, but pay attention to what are the types of research CIES accepts. And then you select one. So one of the type is applied research. So applied research is referred to like projects or programs, intervention, which shows relevance to the field in the indigenous education, international education. So these are the applied work, meaning that actual some intervention in the field. There are some other paper which is called conceptual and theoretical research. That means that you did not do any specific intervention, but you are presenting a theory or concept, critiques of a literature or a program or institution that you are trying to write about, or some theme, some ideas. So that those are conceptual and theoretical work. The third type is called empirical research. So primarily, it is evidence-based. Now, I think that although there is some bias toward quantitative, I think that the both a good qualitative research and also good quantitative research fall into these empirical research categories. So something that shows evidence, and then you can draw some conclusions based on the evidence. So that is the main part. So there are 3 types of research. So now it comes towards the end. What makes a successful proposal? So I share few. I would love to hear from Tutolini and others here. So when you have the proposal in front of you, you make sure that you articulate it clearly, the objective or purpose. And also you share what is the theoretical framework, meaning that what are the framework that you're trying to use, what are the previous literature that you draw upon, and then also clearly state what is your method. Are you doing, say, semi-structured interviews? Are you doing focus group? Are you doing photo? I forgot the term, which is that you collect photo and then you study photo. So analysis of visual materials, or you are doing, say, randomized control study. So clear your methods, techniques, and model of inquiry. And then where are the data sources come from? Also make sure how many in your work. Are you collecting data from 10 people or 20 people or 50 or 100? So making sure that the data sources, the age, the evidence, the objects and materials being used is clearly stated. And then what are your findings? So you want to show, okay, based on this study, these are your findings, A, B, C. You name them specifically. And also, what are your conclusions based on these findings? The next part is, which often people ignore towards the end of the paper, but this is a critical piece. Don't ignore this one. What is the scientific and scholarly significance of your work, of your research? So make sure that it is there. And ask a colleague. So I have been benefited from this. So ask a colleague to read and give you feedback. Because before you submit, you write and you think it is good, but you think of people who are going to read this, they may not familiar with the work that you are doing. So give it to your classmate or colleague or someone that you know to read it and give you feedback. And based on this feedback, you can make some adjustment, and that will make your proposal even stronger. So with that, I would like to ask Tutalini if he has any other thoughts and ideas, and also something that I missed. So please, Tutalini.
Thank you, Mong. I think you did a beautiful job, really, of capturing um, the 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 different components of the conference, and how um, to really submit a um, worthwhile proposal. I think for me, based on the other times that we have done this, is that some people try to send proposals to the Indigenous, to the IKA, Indigenous Knowledge and Academy SIG, because they think it's easier to get their proposal through, which I think is an unfortunate part. And when they do that, is that they don't include specific focus on the charge and the mission of the SIG. So I always encourage people to read that part, because really our aim as a SIG is to be a space for those conversations concerning Indigenous people, Indigenous knowledge. It's for us to advocate and promote Indigenous practices, pedagogies, different ways of knowing that are different from mainstream. But it's not just an advocacy space; it's also a place for Indigenous peoples themselves to seize the mic and to be able to present and speak on their own behalf as well. So when we're reviewing proposal, we're really looking to see if that aspect is crystallized, and it's not just someone who's putting in a proposal because they think perhaps this might be the only way to do that. So I think for me that's the only one that I want to highlight. But other than that, I think you have really done a great job of highlighting the different components of the proposals. So I think it'll be a good time for. I would love to hear maybe from people who have gotten their proposals submitted to the SIG before, if they have any input. If anyone on Zoom here with us has specific questions, perhaps that will really be a great thing as well. I always say that if you don't ask question and you leave me with a mic, I'll just end up telling bad jokes and everything else and embarrass myself. So somebody rescue me. Chet, I think you have a question.
Yeah. Okay. My question is, I found that because before when we joined the CIES, it was a group, it was a panel, but usually we join by submitting individual paper, and I was surprised that 1,000 words is the requirement for individual paper, which is quite a lot compared to other conferences like 250 or so it's quite substantial. So are they strict with that minimum number if you are submitting an individual proposal? Is it the minimum or is it the maximum? The 1,000 word for individual proposal and 500 words for panel.
I believe the 1,000 words is the maximum.
Okay, so it's a
Um, and
maximum.
and and really, here's another way to look at it. When you're submitting a panel and your each individual paper in there is let's say 5,000, is because you're putting together one paper really. So the total word count ends up being really close. The other way to look at it for me, because since it's a research conference, I think you're gonna be challenged to communicate the appropriateness of your proposal in less words, because by the time you talk about the introduction where you're introducing your topic, by the time you put in the methods and talk about how you really collected that data, and you talk about your results and some of your conclusions, by the time you do all of that, I think you're really going to be hard pressed to have it any less than um, it'll probably be really close. 700 to 1,000, I think, will be close. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah. I think
Yeah. So
Shauna, you had no, go ahead, Mo.
please let me just add one other point is that you mentioned about this panel versus individual submission. So in fact, when you present, you can submit as a panel, and then the SIG, we have to accept it either as a panel or we reject it. So that's how this panel submission, group submission work. On the individual submission, we accept individual submission or we reject individual submission. So what is the difference? Difference is that when you do an individual submission, the IKA SIG officers make the panel. So if you say we have 25 good papers. Out of the 25 good papers, the IKA SIG officers will look at where we can group them. And then so a group of 3 or 4, then we make the panel, and then we send out an email to you, say, you are in this panel now. So that's how the individual submission works. But when you're going to present, you will be presenting with 2, 3 other people in the panel. On the other hand, if you think of the group proposal that you submit as a group, we don't have a choice to pick one from the group. Either we accept it as a group or we reject it as a group. As an approach, what I have found is that if you submit as a group, meaning that if you find themes that are really connecting these 3, 4 papers, my bias would be to submit as a panel, as a group, because when you submit in as a group, you are making it easier or for the IKA SIG officers. IKA SIG officers then say, okay, do I think that this whole panel is good, like as a group, or they are not that good. So, but if it is individual, then we have to work with. So I think that sometime people come together and form a group of 3 or 4 people, and then submit a proposal. You can even select who you like to call it as a discussion. So that will make it even stronger. So depend on your case. I hope it is clear to you.
Okay, thank you, Mom.
Great.
I think Shauna, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for presenting. That was really helpful just to get some background information and tips about how to submit the proposal. And this might be an obvious question, but I just wanted to really clarify. So I'm in my last year of my graduate program, and I'm going to be conducting my research in the coming months for my thesis. Is there any way to submit a proposal without the results and the conclusions? So basically submitting a research proposal, and then as the research takes place throughout the year, submitting those results at CIES, or does it have to be all completed by the date of the proposal submission?
I'm gonna take a quick answer at that, and other people can chime in because my approach might be different. as someone who submits proposal and someone who reviews proposals, I'm okay with research that's not completed. Because I have personally submitted research that are in progress, and I find that the conference does really compel me to do that work. So I think that that's how I would approach that. I think it's okay to do it. The challenge then is that I find that a lot of reviewers have a preference for proposals that talk about completed research. So what that means then is that as someone who's proposing a research that is in progress, you just have to really be clear in how that is. So one way to do that would be definitely to say, okay, here's what this research is about. So making really your introduction and your lit review and your method really solid. And then when you're coming to your findings, you just are honest there, say that, you know what, the data collection is still in progress. And then maybe there you talk about sort of what you think might be happening, sort of some of your anecdotal. And I always put in my proposal when that happened that data will be specifically collected by X month. So if I'm submitting my proposal that's due in October and my data collection is happening until December, I will say that specifically that my data is going to be due in December. Now, from a conference planner standpoint, as somebody who has also been on that end of the conference sessions, is that as a conference planner, my worry is to accept a lot of proposals, and then comes the month of the conference and everybody's withdrawing, saying that they didn't do their research or something happened. So I think you always try to avoid that. I usually make sure that when I'm reviewing that proposal, really how strong is it, and how well thought out is this method. And when I'm reviewing that method section, then I'm reviewing to see if the author is really going to be able to carry this out in time for the conference. So that's sort of your typical academic runaround answer that says it depends, but it really just depends on how you structure that proposal. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Thank you very much.
I don't know if anyone else has a different take on that, because I know that many people definitely do prefer fully fleshed out. But I'm in a field that is around technology, and sometimes it's not possible to submit your completed proposal. So I would love to hear from other people.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you, Shana, for your question. I think totally, when I was listening to you, I was like, okay, I felt as if you were giving one answer and that at the same time. So it definitely depends. But usually what I've done, it has happened to me like during the dissertation stage where I have not had everything completed. But one thing that I did was what I totally mentioned, just kind of sharing what are some of the emerging themes, right? So that in such a way that if by the time the conference is on and I'm not done with everything, but at least I have some kind of emerging themes, not everything. So I would definitely encourage you and anyone else to kind of just, while you're submitting your proposal, just make sure that in addition to what he mentioned, that you had strong literature review and introduction and stating that your research is ongoing, but also adding the fact that some kind of emerging themes. What is it that you already see in the data that you have in hand right now? So I think that's the other suggestion that I will give, so that what if happens that you are not available, it's not possible for you to do that, then you can definitely present something. So that's what I wanted to add.
Yeah, and just to add here is that the proposal reviewer are not necessarily these CIES IK-SIG officers, and they come from many different backgrounds. So I think that we don't know how someone will perceive this, but as Tutolini says, there could be, some idea that if you have done any pilot studies, or if you have a hypothesis that where this thing, what kind of output or findings you can expect, so it would be good to share. And also the timeline, because the conference is in April. So it would be good to state that by what time, and preferably a couple of months or more before the conference, that you will have the data not only just receive, but also analyze. So that gives people an idea where you stand, as opposed to saying that we don't have any data yet. So give a little more information, and that will make your proposal stronger.
I don't know if someone else has a question, but I have a question. During your presentation, both of you talked about the individual paper, the panel paper, the group paper. So I was wondering, is there a limit? Like, can I, if let's say I know that there are chances, sorry for the background noise, but if there are chances for me to find the group and the panel I can submit the paper with, is that can I or can someone submit to a panel but also an individual paper? Are there limitations to the number of proposals that you can submit? So that's my question. Thank you.
Rebecca, I think, let me make sure I understand. Are you asking if there's a limit of how many proposals one person can submit?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know what the requirement for this year is. I can't, and Mong, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't know if there has been a concrete answer. I think that's much more of a CIES answer. Typically, conferences like to limit how many proposals you can be on. Sometimes is that you can only submit one. Sometimes you can only be presenting on one. It can only be a first author on one. I think it just I haven't seen the specific guideline for this year yet.
Ideally, CIS wants to submit one proposal per person. However, if you are co-author in other papers, CIS accepts that. But as long as you are not the primary presenters. So say you have a paper where you are the first author, or you are the sole authors. And then if you have a second paper where you are not the main author, you are second or third or fourth author, and you are not the primary presenter either. In that case, CIES may allow you to have the second paper. However, from the CIES board, they encourages to have one paper per person.
Okay, thank you for that. Then you can have one individual paper then, and maybe be part of a panel. In that case, you're not the first author. Am I getting it right?
I would make minor adjustment what you just said. It is not that you are part of the other panel. It is that you are not the primary author of the second paper. So that means that in a panel, suppose a panel of 3 paper, but each paper can have an individual author, or each paper can be a group paper. So there will be any combination of individual or group paper in the panel. So let me take an example. So you have, say, submitted one paper, and then in the second paper, you were the second or third author, and you were submitting as a panel, but that panel may have 2 other papers. So there is a distinction between being part of the panel versus being part of the second or third author on a paper. Is it clear, Rebecca?
Yeah, I think it's clear, definitely. Thank you for that.
Romina has a question.
Yes, thank you. This is just also because of myself, just trying to understand what exactly are the topics that the Indigenous Knowledge in the Academy SIG looks for. Because we're at an international and comparative education society, but the name Academy is quite broad. Thank you.
That's a really good question. And I think, Romina, for me, that's sort of the part that I love about this whole process, the broadness of that interpretation of the academy, because it really does allow people to interpret that however they want. So I think I always resist though giving a straight answer to that, because I don't want to receive only proposals based on what I think. I like to be able to see proposals that make me say, wow, I never thought about that. I never looked at it from that perspective. But having said that, though, I think really we've had tons of different papers, and they have included things such as, I think I presented a paper with my friend Christos in Cyprus, looking at how indigenous people use social media to advocate for their rights around the world. So that could be something. I know that, for example, Mong is very passionate about areas of literacy and education and sort of representation of different populations from his community, and how indigenous people learn in schools. I know that, for example, Rebecca has done things around games and so forth. So I think it's really just and please, Mong and Rebecca, come in and correct me if I have completely butchered up your research. But I think it really just depends on the individual. I think the other way to look at it, maybe instead of getting stuck on the word academy, is maybe education. Could be another way of doing it. And education could be inside formal education or outside of that formal confines of education. So it really just depends. So for me, for example, selfishly, what I would really love to see is proposals that push back at this idea that somehow being indigenous, traditional, native, or whatever word you apply means that somehow you are anti-technology or you're being left behind. I love to see how the intersection between technology and indigenous knowledge. I love to see that. I would love to see things that don't just talk about how indigenous knowledge fits into the academy, but indigenous knowledge as legitimate scholarship on its own, and how that legitimate scholarship is really important in academia as well. So, but I really think that it just depends on the perspective that somebody brings to it, because, like you said, Romina, the word academy is so broad.
Yeah, and I would add to it is that what Tudanin said about education. I think that looking at broader lens of education, because often in academia, what people understand education is schooling. And in my own, when I asked this with village elders and others, they're saying they challenge the notion that they're uneducated. They yes, they don't have the, say, national way of formal schooling, but they have been very effective in their own communities, raising children, teaching them how to be a good human being in the world. So education in a broader sense, and also indigenous knowledge, as well as, even though in the title is indigenous knowledge, I come to appreciate it is indigenous knowledge as well as indigenous ways of knowing. So it is not just the content, but also it is the way we look at the content. We see the content. And then it is that how indigenous knowledge, not necessarily just echoing what Tutulani said, not necessarily always a piece of the academy, but scholarship stands on its own, interacts with the academy, even transform the academy. So I would take that more of a broader approach in that sense. Does it help answer your question, Romina?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
If I may also jump in here and say that maybe another word as well would be learning. In terms of learning, just where learning happens. So because learning, at least even in academia, everybody knows that like it's almost like something that's already accepted, that learning happens everywhere and almost anywhere. So another way of thinking about it, when you think about the indigenous, submitting to the indigenous knowledge in academia, is think about how you're looking at learning, in what different spaces does that learning happen. So that would be another way that can help kind of decipher the complexity and maybe help you hone into what is that you want to focus on.
So Yi Huang asked a question in the chat room. I wonder, Tutulani, if you could shed light on her question. And also, I would like to ask you, we talked about what makes a successful proposal. Maybe you can say a few words about what are the pitfalls to avoid.
Sure, happy to. I love this question. So the question is how to apply indigenous knowledge to environmental protection. And any suggestions on this research topic? The first thing that jumped to my mind when I read that was an example that I have given multiple of times around teaching science, and how it is also valid to talk about indigenous ways of knowing, indigenous knowledges in that perspective. And I always give an example of, when we teach science as something, maybe as a concept like water filtration, we would usually use, think about it in the US, we'll think about it in terms of, test tubes, lab, and filtering and everything else. But many traditional communities for centuries have filtered water with stones and grass and all of these things, and have been able to really do so successfully. So for me, that's another way to sort of apply some of those, what we would think as concept that I taught in the classroom, but putting a traditional lens to it. So the way I think you can look at indigenous knowledge to environmental protection, I think there's so many things. Like, so for example, I'm thinking about even just the Amazon, right? I'm thinking about, part of me is thinking that, Mong, you're setting me up for this because you are well more capable of talking about this than I do. But there's so many different communities, indigenous communities, that are fighting around about the rights of protection for their land that are being destroyed through mining and all of these type of things. So you can do a variety of things. One, you can sort of do an explanatory study that explains what's happening in the area and how indigenous people view the environment, how that knowledge of protecting the environment really sort of is communicated or is explored, or is practiced, and so forth. You can do and you can do an exploratory study that sort of explores how or compares how maybe a community in the Kavango of Namibia is dealing with a Canadian company that wants to come into the area to mine, and how that might destroy their ecosystem. So there is so many different ways that you can do this. I think it just depends really on what aspect that you're looking at. Are you looking at maybe activism of Indigenous people? Are you looking at how they understand protection? Because I would probably argue that Indigenous people traditionally have a very well respected, articulated, and practiced way of protecting the environment. I grew up saying that in Namibia, for example, something as much as like the wildlife, the animals and the people respected each other. So the idea that somehow we're just around poaching and killing wildlife doesn't connect with me, because I grew up around elephants roaming the place. So it's not that that there's this conflict between the indigenous people and the wildlife. I think for centuries people have figured out a way to coexist. So I really think that it just depends on the work that you're looking at and the perspective that you want to take. But like I'm saying, I've heard, I've chatted and listened to Mong talk about this from so many different perspectives. So I'll throw it back to him. But maybe before I give it back to him, let me just talk quickly about what makes a successful proposal. And then I can do that. Or Mong, do you want to come in first before I share that?
Oh, I think that I will just say a word or two. I think, Tutulani, you captured it well. I think that this is a very important topic. Yi Huang, I hope I am pronouncing your name right. And so indigenous people are 470 million people approximately, according to the UN estimate, 5 to 6% of the population of the world, but they are the guardians of 80% of world's remaining biodiversity. So it tells you something. When we talk about climate change, when we talk about destruction of the environment, it is not just only destroying the environment where indigenous people live, but also a destruction of the environment of our humanity. So for millennia, indigenous people found ways, developed ways to have a sustainable resource management. That means that they can gather their food and other materials from the environment, but also at the same time, this way they manage it sustainable. So that is something that is a very important topic. And I would highly encourage you to submit it. And there are many different angles you can take. So if you want to chat more about it, send me an email. I will be happy to chat. Because we are at the time clock, so I wanted to ask Tutulani to share about also what are the key things about success.
Am I frozen or is it Mong frozen?
I think Mong is frozen. I think you can jump into Tiny until he comes back to us.
Okay.
Yeah. Please.
Okay. Mong, before I forget this, I want you to repeat what you just said earlier. Indigenous people are the guardian of 80% of the world's biodiversity. Can you say that again?
Yes. Indigenous people are guardian. That means that either they own some land or they take care for someone else. But they are the guardian of 80% of the world's biodiversity, because biodiversity in many parts of the world is gone. So biodiversity, meaning that large diversity of flora and fauna and animals that remains only few parts of the world. And indigenous people often viewed the relationship with the environment in a way that is reciprocal, not just a land to extract from. And then so these approaches have allowed them to take care of the biodiversity of the land. It is that I charted in the chat window, Professor Megan Bang, she talks about this, is that in other communities, in the basically in the Western, where the man at the top and then everything is at the bottom to exploit. But indigenous communities traditionally looked at their coexistence is related to the coexistence of environment, the trees, the animals, and the birds. So that's why that is one of the reasons that it is their better guardian. They don't see a piece of land it is to extract from, but it is more of a mother earth that sustains us. So these views, and I can talk more, but I think that you get the idea.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you, Chad, for sharing that link. I think that's very useful. But yeah, let me quickly sum up just some of the stuff that I look for in a proposal, because I know that
if I may, for 1 minute, just to jump back in, because it just, listening to you more just came to my mind. Like, it's amazing now that you have all these, what's that, WWF organization going to those indigenous communities to teach them how to take care of the environment. I mean, it was just a thought, so I'm done.
You just want to be problematic, huh?
No, because it just struck me, because they receive all these fonts and I'm following them on Instagram, right? So that's what I was like, okay, yeah. So I'm done.
No, you're right. I mean, it is laughable that the people who are really who have turned their living area into concrete are now the one that are going around telling people who are still maintaining the 80% of what remains how to take care of it. So, but again, I agree, Rebecca. I think that can take us off on a tangent for hours. But so here's what I look for in a proposal. I really want to know, what is your study about and why should I care? That's the first part. Second part, what have other people said about your topic? So I can contextualize it. And then third part, I want to know how you're going to either collect the data that's gonna answer these questions that you have, or how you have collected the data that's answering some of these questions that you have, so that I can judge for myself if I think the way you have collected that data is really able to answer the questions that you have raised. And then 4, I will look to see, what did you find out, and whether what you found out is significant, and so forth. So in academic terms, of course, we'll say your first part, I'm looking at your introduction to see if it situates the conversation about why the topic that you're looking at is important. I really want to see your lit review to see if you actually have literature that talks about why this thing is important, how other people have looked at it. I want to know what methods you have put in there that says how you've collected the data, so I can at least see and judge for myself if that is valid. And then looking at your findings to see what you found and whether or not it connects to the conference. So, and then I also specifically for the IKSIG, I want to make sure that you at least mention something about indigenous knowledge, traditional ways of knowing, or something. So if you don't have anything in there that sort of clues me to that, then I'm going to be suspicious. And then, of course, I also want to know if is it comparative, is it international, or how does this fit into the larger part of CIES? So I think for me, those are sort of the components that I tend to look at and say, okay, does this really fit into the mission of our SIG, and does this connect to the larger picture of CIES? And is it clean? Is it readable? Those are some of the components that I look for. I don't know if anybody has different things to add to that. All right. Over to you, Mong, to perhaps close us out, unless there's other things that we need to go through.
Delaney, is there anything that you notice that people make mistakes, like a pitfall to avoid?
Yes, I think the biggest pitfall to avoid is not knowing the SIG. I think at the very bare minimum, just read the mission of the SIG. So if you're talking about, let's say about, I don't know, technology, and you submit it to the SIG, but you don't talk about what the intersection between that and the SIG, then your paper becomes sort of hard to place, right? So keep in mind that our first priority when we are reading the proposals, we're looking for people who are going to advance the conversation. So as a default, and I think Rebecca and Mong will agree with this, as a default, we want to accept your proposal, right? We want to accept your proposal because we respect what you're submitting, because we also know that we all have different ways of seeing things. So we don't want to necessarily apply our lens as the only way. So as a default, we want to to accept your proposal. So you're already starting off with an A in that proposal grading contest. So it's really up to you now to make sure that we don't change from that position. And you do that by making sure that, cite some literature from people who have done the research, right? Look at books on indigenous methodologies and all of these type of things. So really try to situate the conversation within the discourse of our community. The people for me who have the proposals that I have rejected fall into really two categories for me. One is the proposal that I'm asking myself, I don't know what this has to do with our SIG. So if I can't answer that question, then it's hard for me to want to read further. And then, of course, the second one is just proposals that are really badly designed and are just messy. But really, the biggest thing for me is if I can't see how it fits into the mission of our SIG, then I have a tough time with that. So that's, for me, is the biggest thing.
Thank you, Tutalani. One last thing I would say, do not wait for the last day, because on the last days, there is a lot of traffic. And sometimes you want to submit, but you're not sure it went or not. So it will be good to prepare ahead of time. You can submit ahead of time. And then if you think that this is not complete or you want to add something, you can keep making changes until the deadline is over. So take on the side of the caution, submit, even though say you have a 90% ready, submit it. Don't wait for the last day. And then if you have time, you can go and make some changes there too. So that is my last point. And
actually, Mong, I'm sorry, let me interrupt you quickly before you close. One thing that we want to just quickly touch on there is that Mong and I are actually working on the opportunity to publish your submission. So at this conference, we are going to have an opportunity to let people actually publish proceedings. We're looking at currently at two opportunities. One will either be a proceeding that is hosted online here at Oklahoma State University, but we're also looking at the possibility of or of a special issue journal, or even an edited book and things like that. But no matter what, we are our goal as a SIG is to start figuring out a way to publish our proceedings from this conference, because really at the end of the day, we are the one we are waiting for. We have to advocate for our own voices now, and we have to get our literatures out there. So Mong and I are looking at the ways to make that happen.
That's wonderful. I think that's a great come on. Yes.
And we do have a website and emails that are being put in the chat window there. So make sure that you check that out. I think we even have a YouTube channel too. So so we're a small group, but we have been active over the years. So which is really great. And so Ranisha, so great for you to have to join us. Thank you for coming in.
Yes, I'm happy to see Ronesha too. She has been, she was one of the SIG officers even before I joined. So thank you. And she served the SIG well.
Yes.
Hi, family. I'm happy Indigenous Peoples Day. This is beautiful. I was so excited when I saw the announcement for this, because I know so many people really don't know how to do these things. There's a lot of confusion, or just not even knowing what you don't know about the process. So I'm glad this is recorded. And as a member of Africa SIG, African Diaspora SIG, Cultural Context, and URIAG, I would love to share the recording once this is done with the other groups as well, so that we can all benefit from the great information you shared here today. That'd be okay.
Always good to see you, and appreciate your constant support.
Absolutely.
I think one will be, hi Honisha, good to see you. One will be the YouTube channel. Usually one will upload everything to the YouTube channel. So yeah, Mon, you can give a more detail. But great, yeah. That's a great observation, and thank you, Honisha. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, I think we can probably bring it to close. If you have any other really important point just to mention, let me know.
Maybe I just wanted to add to let people know that if you saw the emails and then the website, go on there. If you have, you feel like you have a proposal, a submission, you are hesitant, send it over there. And then we have a capable hands here, like people who presented today. They can give you a quick rundown, a quick feedback, and to let you know what is it that you're missing, what is it that you need to improve. That's one thing that we want to do as a SIG, just kind of encourage you to remove that fear of not submitting a proposal. So please use the email addresses. We check them often. If you have a question or a draft of a proposal that you want anyone to review, and then we're going to give you feedback as quickly as we can. Just as Mong said, don't wait, the last minute, the last day, nobody will be available. So send it ahead of time. So that's just one thing we want to do. And then let you know that Honisha, you asked, once we have it uploaded on the website, we're definitely going to share the link with you, and then absolutely share with the rest of the SIGs. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we look forward, we're still looking forward to having a reception virtually for all of us to get together again with URIAG and several of the other SIGs focused on culture.
Okay. That's the great news. So with that, let me conclude, and thanking Tutaleni and all the people who joined today. So thank you for this session. And also, if you have a question, feel free to send us email. Wish you best of luck, October 28th. And we are excited and look forward to reading your proposals.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Have a good one, everybody.
Everybody, bye.
Yes. Bye for now.
Bye.